Let W be a number. Translate the expression into an English phrase. So here we're doing some more of that kind of backwards translating. So we're going to translate from math into English. So let's see what our first problem is. The first problem just looks like 8W. Well, when I say 8W, notice that I'm not saying any kind of an operation. So we want to be sure when we translate to English that we talk about what's the operation that's going on here. And in this problem, because there's no operation showing, because the 8 and the W are just rammed up right next to each other, that's that situation that we call juxtaposition, that the 8 and the W are right next to each other with no other operation going on. And so we know that that means that there's going to be multiplication going on here, that the 8 and the W are being multiplied. Okay. So let's think of some different ways to talk about multiplication of these two things. So one way we could certainly say it, we often use the word times for multiply. So we could say 8 times W. That would be a fine way to say it. We could also use the word multiply. We could say multiply 8 and W. And that would be another way to say it. Another thing we could do is we could use the official math word for multiplication, which is product. We could talk about the product. The product of 8 and W. We might also run into a situation where something is 8 times more than something else. So we could say something like 8 times more than W. That might be another way that we could talk about this multiplication going on. So there's lots of different ways to talk about multiplication. So these are some of the correct ways to write this. There might be some other ways that you might come up with as well. If you were to come up with something else, just be sure to check with your instructor to make sure that your way of thinking about it is also correct. This last problem, we have division going on here. So let's think about some different ways to talk about division. Well, if I just looked at this problem, I would say this is W divided by 8. So that would certainly be one way that we could talk about it. W divided by 8. So just think about how do you think about this in your head? If you were to read this problem to a friend over the phone, how would you read it? Pay attention to those words, and that's a way that you're translating it into English. Now we could also use the official word from math that we use to refer to a division problem, which is quotient. So we could talk about the quotient of W and 8. That would be another way of saying that. And with division, there's just fewer ways to talk about it. We saw with adding and subtracting and multiplying, we've got lots of different words that we use for those. With division, we have fewer ways to talk about it. So these would be the two key ways that we could write this. There might be some other ways that you could come up with. If you come up with some other ways, just check with your instructor to make sure that you're on the right track.